Hi. A few years ago, Al Jazeera did their undercover investigative report about the Israel lobby, both in the UK and USA. They did 2 undercover investigations. The Israel lobby UK, the Israel lobby UK, USA. And it was found that in both nations, the Israel lobby, or let's call them for what they are, because this video isn't about dissing Israel, rather about exposing the crimes and criminal intent of the ruling political party in Israel, who's now controlling Israel, the Zionist party. And just as I wouldn't judge America or the people of America according to Trump and his fascist crew, equally I don't judge every citizen of Israel by the actions and ambitions of their equally fascist leadership, who themselves support Trump. And in the UK Israel lobby, the Al Jazeera expose, one of the people who were part of the Israel lobby, based at the Israeli embassy in London, stated very clearly to the camera that their ambition, their objective, is to get Britain to behave more like America, less like Europe and more like America. And there is a reason for that, because Europe has suffered and directly experienced 2 world wars, and Europe has developed a system of society, a social and welfare system that America has never developed, because America has never had to deal with fascism in the same way that the people of Europe have had to deal with fascism, being, as generally speaking, Europeans are of the same colour skin. And so, we understand that fascism and crime haven't got anything to do with skin colour or about one's ethnicity as far as being a European is concerned, but rather about what one as an individual aspires to in life, and whether or not one is prepared to commit crimes or actually enjoys committing crimes. It's part of your desire because you've got a criminal desire for children. In America it's very, very different, because we have there fascism is actually an integral feature of the whole system, in that America itself was established as a fascist force of power that committed genocide against the native peoples and brought in slave labour from abroad, predominantly black-skinned labour, and has traditionally held the South Americans, mostly native South Americans, in contempt, and done everything in its power to crush any attempts within among South Americans to adopt the same social systems as Europe, have been heavily oppressed by mostly corporate America that is subservient to Zionists, and has been for a very long time, since after World War One. Really, America has been very heavily infiltrated by this fascist philosophy, which calls itself Jewish, but actually really has about as much to do with Judaism as the Ku Klux Klan has to do with Christianity, or indeed ISIS has to do with Islam. Because fascism isn't something that, belonging to a particular religion or being of a particular colour skin means that one is motivated more to fascism because you're black, or because you're Muslim, or because you're Jewish. Fascism is something that exists within the human psyche. It is an ambition to be able to live above the law, to get oneself in such a position of wealth and power that you can literally buy yourself freedom, and you can have freedom to do whatever you want to do. And usually the people that are most attracted to fascism are criminal psychologists who, for whatever reason, they want to own and control people, and that is obviously part of their pleasure in life. And they do tend to be empire builders. It isn't enough just to own one country. They need to own this country, that country. They're very paranoid, very defence orientated. Obviously they are, because they're criminals. And so it looks like here we are in 2019, and it looks like the Zionists have their wish. Britain is now behaving exactly like America. We've got our own Trump in, and here we go, right from the offset. Probably is going to be voted in by a rigged election, because I personally don't trust any elections, certainly not an election held under this criminal government who really should have been arrested. Our security services have let us down. He has broken the law. He is a national security threat. According to EU law, this government have behaved like terrorists right from the get-go of David Cameron coming in. But, security services, apparently, they're there to protect the Crown, when actually they're not. But that's the way they're acting at the moment. They're protecting the Crown and the Crown's overseas territories in the form of tax havens, when actually it is very clearly stated that security services are there to protect Parliament, democracy and the economy. So far they've failed. So far the opposing parties have failed to request that the security services act. But it seems that with all the crimes that Boris Johnson has committed, right down to, again, very similar to Trump, we have his the recording of him admitting to sexually assaulting various women. We have the recording of Boris Johnson agreeing to give some guy a number so we can get a journalist battered, perhaps, black eyes and cracked ribs. And the only thing Boris is concerned about is that his involvement may end up getting him sued off this guy. So he wants to know how badly the guy's going to be damaged. Not out of any concern for the guy, but because of concern for himself. This is the kind of people that we're dealing with. So now it looks like Britain, we're going to have our very own Russiagate. Now, I'm not saying that Russia isn't involved in British politics. I think that Russian oligarchs do follow the same Zionist philosophy. There are Zionists among Russians, just as there are Zionists among British Christians, American Christians, Zionists among Muslim people. They follow that fascist psychology. And of course the Russian oligarchs do have an interest in Brexit, as oligarchs around the world have an interest in Brexit, because, they're oligarchs and their interests are mainly about money. The interests of the Zionists, though, are mainly about fulfilling their greater Israel project. And they can do that a lot more easily if pesky Europe is out of the way, if there's no solid and recognised force of power on this earth that can stand up and say, no, what you're doing in Palestine right now is wrong, and you are committing crimes against humanity. If there's no Europe, if Europe has been totally dismantled, there's no free trade union, just dismantled every nation, a corporate slave, operating under what amounts to corporate communism. That's what will be imposed on us, you see. Socialism for the Zionist elites, and their cronies, but for the rest of us, the vast majority of us, 80% of every population, you're talking corporate communism under these Noahide laws. And I'll leave a link explaining the Noahide laws. People still haven't picked up on it much in Britain because the BBC doesn't inform you, you see. Now, as I've recently shared Boris Johnson's the recording of Boris Johnson's telephone conversation, and, you know, it is astounding, isn't it, when you think about it. Imagine if, say, there was a telephone recorded conversation out there of Jeremy Corbyn agreeing to give some guy a number to get a journalist battered to the extent he's got black eyes and cracked ribs, and the only thing he's bothered about is, you know, how bad is it going to be, because I don't want to end up being sued. That if there were such an item of evidence out there in the general public, would any BBC interviewer fail to confront Jeremy Corbyn with that information, with that recording? Would any ITV news presenter, would the Sun not be there, like, immediately, look, this is Jeremy Corbyn, you see? Yes, it came out, it's now ignored, it's like, yeah, that's water under the bridge now. Except it isn't, because we're about to have a general election. Is that the kind of person that Britain is prepared to vote for, as in America, that we're going to be persuaded that we're going to vote for the kind of guy that arranges to get people beaten up just on the word of a friend who's saying, this guy's got my blood up, who will sexually sexually assault women, who will just lie through his teeth, who has colluded with Russian oligarchs. How can he even be standing? How can he still be in office? Why did Theresa May have to resign in comparison to him? Really? Why is that guy still there? Why haven't security services just gone right out and arrested him? Because we're living by a script now. It's the same script. This is a distraction. The biggest threat to the British people right now is this Tory government. Because they collude with the oligarchs of Russia. Because they collude and jump to the tune of the Zionist fiddle. Because they are a huge part of Trump and his entourage. Because they are a criminal cabal. That's the fact of it. They are a force of tyranny, and they have attacked Britain from within as agents of foreign powers. That includes Israel, America, Russia, and even Saudi Arabia. All of those known to be violating human rights of various ethnicities and minorities within their own nations and externally from their nations. Even America and Britain colluding to back a coup, and some nations of Europe to back a coup against a lawfully and democratically elected leader of Venezuela. This is how serious, this is how much power they have. Now they want to distract us with Russia again. As I say, I'm not saying that he's not a Russian asset, but what I'm saying is that it wasn't Putin that flew over to visit Boris Johnson at number 10 the day after he unlawfully prorogued Parliament. No, that was Netanyahu. Netanyahu, to give his support, a man being investigated on criminal charges himself as leader of his own country, and also condemned by the UN as guilty of human rights abuses and war crimes. He's there at number 10 to give a hand of support to Boris Johnson the day after he's criminally, unlawfully prorogued parliament. Was it Putin that came over? No. And we go back to the Al Jazeera expose, and I'll leave you the links to the videos under this, all of them. Watch that video, understand what is going on here. Because when it comes to these very wealthy people of the world, it doesn't matter whether they're Russian, whether Israeli, American, it really doesn't matter. They're part of a club, they're part of an elite, and they can't wait to get their teeth into Britain, and they really will suck us dry. You know, people, if you own your house now, if Boris Johnson had managed to get his hard Brexit, you would not own that house by the end of 5 years. That's how long I'd give it before 80% of the British populace had literally lost everything that they possessed. You'd be living in rented property, rented cars. You know, I mean, we are talking about the British workforce, as the Tories had stated very clearly, and people just brushed it aside as if. Please, start listening to what these people are saying, because they mean it. When they say they want the British workforce to be competitive with that of Asia. Understand what they're talking about here. Understand what that means. Understand what it means when they give corporations based in Britain huge tax breaks and the legislation, the rights to bring in as many workers from abroad as they please, from anywhere in the world. Understand what that means, people. When they talk about sweeping fiscal tax cuts, when they talk about a bonfire of rights and regulations and laws. Human trafficking. Well, London's already the child abuse capital of the world, according to United Nations Child Protection Investigation and Report. Okay. Expect human trafficking to be here like nobody's business. Expect your benefit system. As George Osborne said, let's bring back the workhouse. Well, they are bringing back the workhouse. The factory prison. Expect that to be replacing your benefit system. Expect families to be living in one room. Expect Victorian Britain, but actually even worse than that, we're going back to the 1750s. It's enclosure all over again. Yes, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million people are very likely to die within the first 10 years of the austerity on steroids that Boris Johnson's Brexit will deliver. But meanwhile, him and his cronies will have made billions betting against our sovereign currency. And the only part of Britain that will have achieved sovereignty then, will have any sovereignty worth having, will be the City of London, that state within a state, that separate state that thinks that it can live above the law. And it is for their sakes that we've been going through this hell. It is for their sakes that we are living in this divided society. And it's for their sakes that we have such a corrupt government, a corrupt media, and surely too, we must have a corrupt civil service. Because they have not done their job. And I would say, you look at Boris Johnson, the lies he's told, none of this would be tolerated if it was from Corbyn. But because Corbyn has righteously voiced his distress and disturbance at what the Zionists are doing to the Palestinian people of Israel, and even their own citizens that protest against them, then Jeremy Corbyn's called, oh, he's anti-Semitic. The members of the party are leaving because he's being anti-Semitic. How can it be anti-Semitic to call out a criminal for their crimes. Being a Zionist does not give you a right to commit crimes. I mean, nobody's going to say anything about it, because if they do, they're being anti-Semitic. This is gone now. It's gone. That narrative has been scrubbed out. Many, many Jews stand with Jeremy Corbyn. And Jeremy Corbyn stands with them. Jeremy Corbyn's not anti-Israel. He's pro-human rights. And we all need to be pro-human rights. And that's what this election needs to be about. But I tell you now, if Boris Johnson is somehow voted in, if the Tories manage to form yet another coalition government, I'm afraid it really is time for British people to stand up and do in Iceland and explain, because we have to know that we cannot be governed by criminals, and that we cannot trust any election that's being run by criminals. And actually this whole election itself is illegal because it's being run under governance of a force of tyranny, a criminal power. Now, I don't understand why none of Parliament seems to understand this, that, alright, we cannot have a general election while the country is being governed by a tyrannical, criminal government. You see? Because we can't trust the results of the election. We can't trust even the media. Because a government has powers to bring all kinds of pressures in all kinds of areas that they wouldn't even have access to if they weren't actually in government. So the government has empowered, the criminals are empowered. They have powers over the police, powers over the military, powers over the media. That's why I do not accept this general election. I do not understand how Parliament could agree to it, how the security services can agree to it. I do not trust the results. They're already giving us fake polls to bamboozle people. They're telling outright lies about Corbyn. They're not picking up on the very real crimes of a criminal, lying Prime Minister who will just stand there and tell barefaced lies, as even Dominic Grieve has recently pointed out with, Boris Johnson saying, oh no, it takes 6 weeks, before we release these, we should be releasing the details about this Russian thing. But when Dominic Grieve says, no, actually, it's 10 days, he's just lying. He's lying about such a serious issue. Such serious issues that we're going to leave Britain in need of a stockpile of body bags. These are serious things. And because the BBC and the media and this whole government look at the British public like expendable stock that you can just throw away. Oh yeah, we're going to have austerity. Yeah, we'll just throw away 130,000 people and nobody's really bothered because they were poor anyway. Why were they poor? Why were people poor? Why have people got no hope? Why is there a shortage of nurses? We've not got a shortage of people. Because what they've done to the education system, it costs what? £50,000 to train to be a nurse. That's how much debt you will accumulate training to be a nurse and working for free for the NHS. We're talking about a system that just takes and gives nothing back. There's not even a trickle down. It's literally just take, and all the money leaving the shores of Britain to go where? Into the Crown territory tax havens. And who's Britain's security services acting to defend and protect? Not Parliament, not democracy, not our economy, but the Crown and the Crown territories. And this is wrong. And actually, in doing so, even the Crown itself is putting the royal family at risk here. Because the royal family, the throne of England, is about the United Kingdom. But what these people have got planned, Brexit, is to break up the United Kingdom. So what do we end up with? A throne of London City? We need to forget the political shenanigans. I mean, Jo Swinson, every time you turn the TV on, she's there. They're just throwing her at us constantly. She's a woman. She stood by these criminals. She voted every single time with Boris Johnson. Every single time. For all the courts, everything, all the damages that they've done to this country, that woman was right by their side. You think you can trust her? The only person we can trust is Jeremy Corbyn. And I say, let's give that man a chance. So I'm going to vote for him. I will see what the election, what the results are. It's either going to be a happy Christmas or a really miserable Christmas. But I can't... Only a very stupid nation could really have difficulties choosing who to vote for in this upcoming GE. Because, you know, Jeremy Corbyn, he's offering something for everybody. Now they're saying now there's going to be so many trillionaires leaving Britain or something. It's like, well, go away then. Go away, because you don't spend your money here anyway, do you? You're just here to take, because you're scroungers. You are the real scroungers, you billionaires. What is it? You billionaires, multi-billionaires. How have you become multi-billionaires? Not because, oh, you're working harder than a guy who drives the buses every day. Because you're taking more and more. You're taking more, actually, than you're worth, aren't you? You know, you're the kind of people who earn, you know, $1,000 a minute. 1,000 quid in the time it takes the average person what they might earn in a month doing very much harder work, like for example nurses, trainee nurses. No, get out of Britain. Go and stay in your tax havens. We don't want you here. We can actually grow an economy with hemp. That's all we need, hemp. Investment into the eco-technology. We can produce everything we need, our own materials, our own fabrics, oil, you name it. You billionaires go off with your dirty, filthy, criminal money. Jesus whipped you all out of the temple, and the people of Britain, we're going to boot you right out of our yard. Okay? So bring it on. Vote Jeremy Corbyn, people. I don't care what your political background is. I've never been a part of any political party in my life. Never voted for any of them. Okay? That was my attitude to politics. But one man comes forward, Jeremy Corbyn, and as I say, you can go through my videos. I was very suspicious of him. I was critical of him because I felt he was another Mr. Wishy-Washy. But no, he stood up. He's shown he's got a backbone. More power to him. Give him your power. Give him your vote. Let's put Britain back on its feet. And if we want to leave the EU, you know, well, let's do that when we are a strong nation and we have the capability of standing on our own 2 feet in this world. And at this very moment, under this horror of the last 10 years of Tory rule nearly, we are badly beaten. We're literally on a stretcher. It's no time to be leaving Europe, people. It's no time to be leaving our free trade union and to put ourselves under rule of these absolute outright fascists. And whether they're Russian, like I say, all this Russian business, yeah, he probably is a Russian asset, But believe you me, he's a Trump asset and is a Netanyahu asset as well.